I'm not a Canelo fan, I'm not a Terence Crawford fan, so I have no means to really say that Crawford should beat Canelo Alvarez, but I really do think that that's what's going to take place. I feel like Canelo just hasn't looked tremendous in his last few fights, hasn't really got a stoppage win. I'm not saying that he can't land something big on Terence Crawford, I just wouldn't bet on it. At this point in Canelo's career where we haven't really seen him very active, his output has decreased tremendously and his foot speed is starting to slow down. That gas tank clearly isn't what it once was, and he's just not able to find that precision anymore, because of the low output. You have to throw punches to land something big. You can't just depend on one shot, and that's what's most concerning about Canelo Alvarez beating Terence Crawford. I don't have a reason to be biased towards Terence Crawford. I'm not really like the biggest Terence Crawford fan in the world. He beat up my favorite fighter, Errol Spence Jr., but if you look at it, even taking that fight away, Terence Crawford's still the faster fighter between Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford, and it's just going to be interesting. I feel like Crawford's also the physically stronger guy. I know people are making a lot out about the weight and whatnot, and I get it because, of course, in boxing there are weight classes for a reason, but it's not like Terence Crawford's fighting Benavidez, where Benavidez is all the way up here compared to Crawford, and Crawford would have to be punching, more so up here. But, against Canelo Alvarez, if you look at that face-off, Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez, they're eye level to each other. Canelo isn't even as tall as Terence Crawford. It looks like Terence Crawford is looking down at Canelo and Canelo's looking up at him. So it's like Canelo's going to be the smaller guy technically, and I know he's going to look physically chunkier and a little bit more muscular than Crawford maybe in terms of mass, but that doesn't matter in the boxing ring. Ultimately, it could slow him down, and Crawford knows that. Crawford knows that he's a faster fighter. He's a little bit more dynamic and agile on his feet, and I think that's what's going to be the key to victory for Crawford. I think Canelo can land something big. That's his main way of winning. I don't think Canelo fans really understand that their biggest inspiration in the world isn't at his peak anymore. Neither is Terence Crawford, but Terence Crawford is aging a little bit more slowly than Canelo Alvarez is. Canelo's like going like this, respectfully. When you look at his performances, it looks like he's getting significantly more and more tired. And against Crawford, I just don't see it happening. Because you look at Canelo's style, right? He's typically and traditionally a slow starter. Everybody likes to say him and Tank, both slow starters, downloading information, but like in actuality, they're just saving their energy to ultimately get the knockout in the end, right? We saw Lamont Roach and Tank wasn't able to do what he typically does. Everyone likes to say he's a slow starter, but eventually he had to pick it up and wasn't able to do that against the guy who was talented in Lamont Roach. Tank's used to starting slow and then he picks it up, and usually the fighter isn't good enough, or the fighter will eventually rush in so that it makes it easy for Tank. Lamont Roach didn't do that. I see a similar fate with Canelo and Crawford. I think Canelo's obviously, he's that slow starter. He's going to start off really slow, and he's going to expect to land something big in the mid to later rounds. But against Crawford, I think it's going to be the same thing as like Tank and Lamont Roach. I think Canelo's going to wait too long, and that perfect opportunity might not come, and then we might see something similar happen. And I think Terence Crawford, instead of getting a draw like Lamont Roach did, I think he's going to win a decision against Canelo Alvarez, because I just don't think that Canelo's going to be able to catch Crawford with that one shot. And I think one shot, even if it hurts Terence Crawford, it's not going to put him out. It's not going to be enough to put him out. Canelo has great punching power. He has a great chin. I'm not expecting Terence Crawford to go in there and knock out Canelo Alvarez or stop him, but I do expect Crawford to be too quick, too skilled for Canelo to win, and I think Crawford's going to win a decision, and I think it's going to shock a lot of people, but that's honestly what Canelo gets. Now if Canelo loses to Crawford, and this is a guy that's supposed to be smaller than him, coming up in weight, and then he beats him in his own division, how's that going to look for Canelo Alvarez? People are going to be like, oh, he's old, but I'm already saying, like, Canelo's aging, honestly. Canelo is aging, and I don't want that to be a built-in excuse, because all the Canelo fans are saying, oh, he's not aging, he just had a bad opponent. Okay, he had a bad opponent that didn't want to win, but also Canelo's physically looking slower. He's physically looking less conditioned, and against Terence Crawford, who is the older fighter, Crawford still has a better gas tank than Canelo Alvarez, and I think that's going to be the difference in the fight. Ultimately, Crawford's just going to be faster than Canelo. Canelo's not going to be able to time Crawford enough, or he might land something big. He might land a big shot or two, but I don't think it's going to be enough to put Crawford to sleep, or stop him. I think that Canelo's punching power is solid, but he has to catch Crawford. He's going to have to catch somebody who's a much smaller target and is much more skilled than he is, in my opinion. I think Crawford's way more skilled than Canelo is. He shows us much more, fire and a lot more of his skill set as opposed to Canelo, who's just, constantly walking guys down and waiting for a big shot, throws one big shot, throws another big shot, but then that's it. There's no combination. There's no, footwork to go with it. I just feel like Crawford's going to outmatch Canelo in every department and cruise to a decision, and I think that's how the fight plays out. Might even be a boring fight, but I think Crawford's going to win. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. It's been your boy Matt with Nabs Boxing. Catch you guys on the next boxing video. Peace.